episode is brought to you by A3, a CMMC cloud-based collaborative environment for an organization seeking certification, otherwise known as an OSC, to build CMMC packages and share with a marketplace of consultant RPOs and assessor C3PAOs. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of 123 CMMC. My name is Dana Mantilia, and I will be your host. And our guest today is Ken Muir. I knew I was going to screw that up. We have a hot topic today. We are going to talk about incident response planning and how important it is. So hello, Ken. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Dana. Thanks so much for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
No problem. Why don't you take a minute just to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, it'll just take a minute. So I've actually been in this business since about 1993, actually. So I've had kind of a front row seat of watching how cybersecurity has really developed all those years. And, obviously back in the day, people didn't even know what the internet was. So, even having an understanding that cybersecurity or information security as it was then, would grow into what it is today. But I don't think I certainly didn't understand how it would grow to be what it is today.
Yeah, it's crazy. I can't even imagine the difference of what you can see from 1993 to now. It's got to be.
Oh, I know. I mean, back then it was, do you have a firewall? Check. Or actually, it was a router back then. Do you have some antivirus? Check. Okay, you're compliant.
Well, I used to always say too that in the 90s, the email training was okay. No emails from Nigerian prince. Anything else is probably fine. Just don't respond to those. The Nigerian prince, that was it. And look for misspellings. Like that was another big thing. Ooh, misspellings. So anyway, okay, back to our topic. So today we're going to talk about incident response. And here is our first question. So what is incident response planning and why is it so important?
So incident response planning is really, really important. I think it's kind of moved up the ladder in terms of levels of importance just because nobody should be under the illusion that they will never get breached. So, that's kind of the first thing, but it's really how you deal with that breach is really what makes the difference between an organization that kind of goes up in flames, particularly with what's happening with ransomware, as opposed to somebody who's able to detect and respond to something very quickly and be able to reduce the impact of what that breach potentially could do for them.
Yeah, and the magical question is how do we convince people and companies that they need to take these precautions? Because everybody thinks it's going to happen to somebody else. So we need to somehow find out what that magical answer is. I don't know what it is. I don't know how
Yeah, and I mean, it is difficult because you've got to be able to convince organizations that it's really an important part of their business strategy. That's really what it comes down to, that it actually is a part of the business strategy. In some organizations I've worked with, they're actually using it as a kind of a marketing strategy as well, where they're actually using that as a way to promote their business, to say, we care about your data this much that we're actually using industry best practices to help to secure your data and your privacy. So that's kind of a missed opportunity as I see it. Most organizations are really looking at it as just a pure cost center, which is definitely not.
Right. But that's a great point about the marketing, saying, hey, look at what we're doing to protect your stuff. I mean, a lot of the stuff is just good basic business practices for protecting information. I mean, when it was paper stuff and it was in filing cabinets, you were certainly protecting it, right? So why are we not protecting it as much as we should when it's digital? So
yeah, absolutely.
All right, back to our question. So what does it mean to have proper detection and analysis?
So in order for a response to actually take place in the first place, you need to be able to detect, from the tons of events that you get on a daily basis, to be able to figure out what an incident actually is. And so the response piece of that and containment really falls into that scenario. One of the things that, we're big advocates actually for using industry best practices, depending on, the type of organization. There's different frameworks or standards that you can use, but we're really big advocates for those things. And so being able to have proper detection, be able to analyze information, and then act on it as quickly as possible is really, really important. The distinction here too, I just wanted to clarify, like there's incident response and there's incident response. So we run a managed security services practice as part of what we do. And so the incident response, as far as a SOC analyst is concerned, like a security operations center analyst is concerned, is, pouring through millions of events, extracting the things that are relevant, and then responding to what they consider to be an incident. And so this is typically something that may not have happened yet, but we're forewarning that this is a potential for something that could be debilitating for the organization. The incident response that we're referring to is, in the event that something actually is happening, the response that needs to take place from there needs to kick in and hopefully contain the breach. So the analysis around what's actually happening in an environment to be able to determine whether it's a threat or risk to the organization that's where that comes from, actually.
Okay. Good point. All right. What are some basic steps? Start with the basics.
So the basic steps really is to actually build a plan. There are a lot of templates out there that any organization can use to actually build these plans. I remember years ago, the first ones that I ever did, I couldn't find them anywhere. I couldn't find any templates based on cybersecurity specific incident responses. And so I had to look at what the emergency services were doing in order to build out my first plan, because what they were doing seemed to make a lot of sense. And if you look at what they do and what we do in the cyber world, it's very similar today. But that's really where I got my inspiration from initially. And so you need to work with your team in order to figure out, what the responsibilities are for the different people and what the priorities are, once an incident actually takes place. But the basic step really is to try to get that plan in place. Now, I also understand that it's easier said than done. Most organization resources are so stretched that spending the time to actually do these things is really challenging, along with building policies and procedures and putting in good practices and all the other things that they're challenged with without getting the actual resources. And so that's one of the reasons why our practices are designed to help to jumpstart organizations, to get them from zero to actually having a plan. I actually conduct tabletop exercises with the organizations that we deal with to test those plans as well, to make sure that there aren't any gaps in the plan, because it's not possible to build a solid plan on the first go around. They always need tweaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a good point too. We have to remember this isn't print off the template, enter your company's name, and then print it out and stick it on a shelf somewhere.
That's exactly right.
But I think everybody's so used to looking at this as, okay, let's check the box, done, check the box, done, where this has to be a living document, living system, policies, procedures, everything has to be continually reviewed, exactly like you just said. So that's a good point. This isn't a set it and forget it kind of thing.
Yeah, I also remember years ago, I was trying to look up the name of it again. I'm a voracious reader of everything cyber, and I always remember this one incident. It was several years ago, one big organization that got breached, and the CEO in the media that he responded to an interview said that he always remembered getting on the call for the incident that happened, him and the CFO, and there was nobody else on it because nobody understood what they were supposed to be doing.
Yeah, well, that's what I always say too, is that if there is no plan, then it's going to be like the Wild West, and every employee is going to do what they think they should be doing, which may not be what you think they should be doing.
That's right.
All right. So who's involved and what are their roles and responsibilities?
I know that's a good segue into this question, actually, as it turns out. So the roles and responsibilities are going to vary depending on the size of the organization. And we work with small, medium, large, extra large, extra large organizations on these different things. And so when it comes to like the tabletop exercise, as an example, is a really good way to kind of explain this, is that when we get people into the room, this could be literally everybody that would be involved in it, literally from the person that actually called in, say somebody, a user, for instance, called in and said, I've got an issue with my machine. It looks like it's doing something funky. Can you help me with that? And that goes to the help desk, and then they escalate, and then up and up and up. And so this can go right up to the CEO level as well. So the roles and responsibilities have to be broken down by different people. It could be that, as far as these tabletop exercises go, for instance, I'm bearing in mind that I don't coach them in the exercise. I just give them the scenario. I say, 2:00 on New Year's Day, this person calls in, what do you do next? And then you find out there's nobody at the help desk because they're all away. And so, you know what I mean? I guess it's things like that. So, including people like the marketing, for instance, they need to make sure that they've got some kind of a PR response for the media, because one of the things I always joke about is you don't want to see them writing something like, we were hit by a really sophisticated cyber attack and we brought in the best cybersecurity company in the world to help us with this. basically what that's saying is that we had nothing, and now we're bringing a security company in to help us to get something. That's what that's saying, because I've read this over and over and over and again. The response really needs to be that, our tightly controlled security practices allowed us to, detect some issues in our network, and we shut it down. We've checked to make sure forensically there's no issues with that, so everything's good. Those are the types of responses but the PR has to be handled by marketing. Typically, you need to make sure that you have access to the insurance company to find out what coverage you have. You need to make sure you have legal counsel. Very, very important, actually, to make sure that you have an understanding in how you would engage with them as well, and on and on and on. And the most important person in that role is the incident commander, because it cannot be a situation where everybody's talking to everybody. Somebody has to be the central point of contact that actually coordinates all of these efforts. And so we refer to them as an incident commander. And so that's one of the things. But then even if you have one of those, if that person's away on vacation, who's taking that role? So all these things have to be considered when you're actually creating these plans, and they're not evident when you first create them in the first place. Hence the reason why the tabletop is really, really important.
SteelRoot, a national leader in helping companies in the defense industrial base with CMMC preparation and federal cybersecurity regulations. Big or small, SteelRoot is here to help design, build, and manage IT. The SteelRoot reference architecture is a secure, cloud-native operating environment built on zero trust principles. SteelRoot also provides managed cybersecurity, IT, and virtual ISSO services. Visit steelroot.us for more information. Well, and if you think about, two separate organizations, that exact same scenario, and one that has that spelled out and one that has nothing, and it's the same situation, and how it's handled is going to be completely night and day. If you don't even know, where's the phone number for the insurance company? Who do we have a lawyer? Who do we call here for this? Is it a special lawyer? If they don't even know what this is, and it's just time is going on and on and on, and the way that it's being handled is not going to be the right way. And I also say too, you need to talk to the people that aren't maybe involved in handling, or were involved with a cyber attack, the other employees. They at least need to know what to say to the world or what not to say to the world. Otherwise you could have, I use this example all the time, some kid in the back room in the stock room, and he's on Twitter, telling his 10,000 followers, hey, we're at work and we just got hacked. You don't want that either.
Exactly. And you made a really good point there, because when you're working with legal counsel as part of your communications, that has client lawyer confidentiality. But to your point, if somebody's twittering the fact that there's an incident and not part of that solution, that all becomes public information that can be called on a later date. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
This segues right into our next question, which is about what do you need to consider for incident communications?
So the communication piece is super important. Like, people take for granted the fact that you already have communications. You got email, you got a cell phone, you got this, you got that. The problem is when you actually are in an incident, as we've been describing as part of this show so far, that can all go out the window very quickly. I'll give an example. Like, one of the universities I did this for just before COVID, I walked in the room, there was about 40 people in the room. Everybody was there, including the CFO as well. And, they were proudly announcing the fact that, yeah, we're going to be using Teams. We got it all on our phones. And that's how we're going to communicate, et cetera, et cetera. And so as part of that exercise, I make people do things. So they say, oh, I've got to call the CFO. Okay, well, call them up right now. Let's see what they say. And so they actually have to do these things. Well, what the question came around was, okay, this scenario has happened here. How are you going to communicate with this group? And so they, got on and said, okay, we're going to connect with this group and we're going to make them do, so-and-so. Finds out that they're not actually a part of the permission list to even access this group in the first place. And so you literally could lose an hour or more just trying to get that set up in the first place. And so it's these things, the communication piece of it is so important, because timing is everything. The quicker you can respond to these things, because you have a well-rehearsed plan, including the communication piece, is really important. Another example was, I asked them, who would be the person that would authorize cutting communications to your external buildings or offices or remote offices or something like that. And he said, oh, the CFO is going to do that. I said, well, call her right now. I'll guarantee you she's on a meeting. So they call and they she didn't pick up and left a message and didn't pick up. And then an hour later, she calls back. And I said, okay, who's going to be your next person in line to make that decision? Because it's a big decision. You're cutting communications to a lot of the organization. You're going to put, you're going to be putting people, and creating a scenario for them where they're not going to be able to work anymore. And so that's a really, really important decision to make. So who's next in line for that? And so it's these little things that you don't really understand until you do them, how critical they are to responding in a timely manner.
And the actual doing is so different than just being able to say, well, this is what we do. And that, with CMMC, and the assessor comes in and you say, oh, well, this is what we do. And then they say, okay, well, show me. Then that's when you have to make sure that the show me is going to actually be able to be done. So that's awesome that you do that with the tabletop exercises and make them actually do what they're saying that they're going to do, so they can see, does this work or does this not work?
Yeah, I mean, I have a business background as well as a technical background. I've worked in marketing and sales and business development and all these types of things. And one of the good things that, for me, luckily, when I'm working with companies, somebody says, oh, I need to type in this thing to make this thing happen. I say, oh, well, show me what you're typing in, because I want to see that you're actually able to do these things when it comes down to that. And so one of the responses I got at one tabletop exercise that I did was at the end of it, it lasted for about 6 hours, this engagement. And people said at the end of it, like they actually felt like they went through the real thing. And for me, that's gratifying, because that is the point, is to really kind of stress the situation and make them really, think about what it is that they need to do. But it puts them in a much better position. And I think the overriding message is not just for incident response, but for everything that you do, you need to have a plan.
Absolutely. A plan. I always say when we were kids, we all did a fire drill and we all knew what to do if there was ever a fire drill, and there weren't schools burning down every single day, but there are cyber attacks and data breaches and ransomware attacks happening every single day. So we do need to get a plan.
I know. I remember just one comment somebody told me when I was much younger was a failure to plan is a plan for failure.
Yep. Perfectly stated. All right, so here we go. So what does it mean to have proper containment procedures? This is another important one.
Yeah, it is. It kind of references a little bit what I mentioned earlier. Like if you're an organization that has, multiple locations and you detect early on that one of them is potentially going to be taken down by ransomware, the containment response to that needs to be swift in cutting the communications. There's another aspect to this as well. Unfortunately, most organizations' network designs are not very secure. You've got all of your critical servers in with everybody else's PCs. Somebody could walk in with a malware-infested laptop, plug it in, and boom, the whole place goes up in flames. Mm-hmm. So proper network design is really crucial to this, making sure that your critical assets are not in the same network as the rest of everybody else. And it sounds like an obvious thing to say, but it's just not a practice that a lot of organizations do. But if you do have a good network design and you do detect that there's something going wrong, say in the end user space, you could easily cut communications between them and your critical servers to provide that containment. And so again, the detection, analysis, and the response piece, if you've got good network design that's resilient, you're able to do these things in a very quick way. So that's some examples of being able to contain a breach.
Mm-hmm. And that means preparation in the way that you lay that out. Mm-hmm.
That's right. Again, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, so what are some resources we can use for reference?
So there are a lot of, Google is everyone's, university today. You can Google a lot of templates for these things. But in terms of being able to find materials on this, NIST has a really good incident response planning guide that you can Google and download. This would be a really good place to start for looking at something like that. But again, we're also aware that time is really precious for a lot of the organizations. They're already, fighting fires and planning for the future and, doing upgrades and all kinds of things that you typically do on a day-to-day basis. But these really, really are important to start looking at. Try to put aside the time to do that, or reach out to somebody that can help you accelerate that process. Because if you look at it, there's millions of companies that have been taken down by ransomware. every single one of them will tell you they have the best tech in the world. Everyone will tell you that they've got great endpoint security, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So then the question is, why are you still getting taken down by ransomware? And so the assumption should never be that, it's never going to happen to me. Using these resources are going to help you a lot to get to where you need to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for all of your awesome information and your expertise. Really appreciate that. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on the show. I truly believe that this is an area that companies really need to focus on, but it's not happening for the most part.
Yeah, I think it's overwhelming too. And anytime anything is overwhelming to us, we tend to just kind of kick the can down the road a little bit if we don't need to deal with it. So
that's right. That's why we're a very disciplined organization. We teach our customers discipline around cybersecurity, and they, for the most part, they really like it because it provides structure, discipline, planning, strategy, prioritization, budgeting, all that kind of stuff. But unless you're really doing these things, yeah, it really is overwhelming. You need to, bite that. You need to eat the apple kind of one bite at a time. Is really the exercise.
Exactly. Start, and even if you're just doing a little, it's better than what you weren't doing.
It's absolutely, anything is better than nothing.
Right. Well, thank you, and thank you everybody for watching. And we hope to see you on the next episode of 123 CMMC. Take care till then.